Okay, in this presentation, lecture, we're going to look at the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain, and then also talk about how it spreads beyond Great Britain. But we're going to talk about it in Great Britain because that's where it starts. We're going to see this is from about the 1750s, really 1760 until 1850, so about a 100-year stretch of time here. So these are some key terms. I would suggest pausing the video and filling these in on your guided notes. But you can see here we got the idea of assembly line. Which is where you have a series of workers complete a given task. You have capital, which is just wealth or money. It's what you own. Capitalism is an economic system where people control property. Communism is then an economic system usually in opposition to that, where the state or government owns the property and money and gives it based on what the people need. Imperialism is where you go and conquer other countries as one country. Industrialization is the process of shifting the economy from farming to manufacturing. Joint stock companies are companies that are share ownership between many people, and what they buy is a stock in that company, and that spreads out the risk. Laissez-faire is an economic system where the government is not intervening much. That is what capitalism would fall under. Laissez-faire would not apply to communism. Monopoly is when you have a business that controls a whole certain commodity or a set of businesses or something like that. Socialism is an economic system that's kind of in between communism and capitalism, where the government is going to partially own some things and control some aspects of the economy, but not all of them. And then urbanization is the process of becoming more people living in cities and more people living in and around cities, less rural areas. So, why did the Industrial Revolution start in Europe and really in Britain? So, first off, it starts in Europe primarily because there's a rivalry between all the European states, the kingdoms at the time, and they're trying to one up each other. And so this is one way to get ahead, is industrializing, and that's what Britain kind of comes up with. Two, the governments, especially in Britain, support organizations like joint stock companies and tax breaks for certain organizations, and they support monopolies, and so that enables this. They're also a center for global trade. They become even more so after this, but they are one of the major centers of trade because they kind of control the trade coming from the Americas. And then they have the natural resources that you need for this, two of those primarily being iron and coal. And if they don't have those resources, they can get them from their colonies in the America. They also have surplus labor because of population growth, and food surplus also because of their interactions with America. And they can get costs of goods for fairly low from their American colonies because of slavery. So that's also going to give them more capital to be able to do some investments on things. So that's why it's in Europe. And Britain fits all these categories. Not all the European states fit these, but this is why it happens in Britain first. So natural resources, we brought up coal and iron. Those are the two most important ones. Coal, because it provides energy, and it's going to allow iron being smelted into steel. And then iron is because it's going to be used pretty much in everything. If you want a durable machine, you want a durable piece of equipment, you're going to need to make it out of iron. Or you're going to up that iron and make it into steel by getting more of the impurities out of it. And you can see on this map here, it's not entirely clear, but those orange areas and those dots are where you see a lot of these deposits, and Britain has plenty of them. Transportation-wise, as well, we'll see come out of this two new ways of moving around. One is making canals, which aren't necessarily a new thing, but the growth of canals being used is huge. And so you're using sorry, I jumped ahead on the canal part. But waterways are going to be the first way, using rivers. But when you don't have a river, you're going to make an artificial river, essentially, which is the canals. And that's going to lead, and the reason why you use water and all that stuff instead of going over land is because you can carry more, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's going to lead to faster communication, and that's all going to be able to increase trade. Later on in this time period, we're going to see it shifting away from the waterways, although the waterways will still be used. But a lot of it's going to shift over to the railroads because they're a little bit easier to make than a canal, or maybe a lot of it easier because you don't have to dig into the earth and do all that stuff. So canals are going to be replaced by railroads, but that doesn't mean they become obsolete and no one uses them. Even the canals are still used today. So that's kind of transportation that happens from this, or that it makes possible. The big event, though, that makes this whole thing possible is the agricultural revolution and the second one. So we talked about the first one. That was the Neolithic one way back in the day. This one is the second agricultural revolution that happens with the with the new ideas and inventions that come out, especially with the use of iron, and there being able to be more iron being produced. And so you get new inventions like the seed drill, the horse hoe, crop rotation, fertilizer being known to do stuff, some new crop planting techniques. And so all those start to get utilized, and that leads to more production of food, and that leads to more growth in population. And so we can see here on this slide or on this image here, like just how much the population goes up. We're talking about shortly after the Black, well, not shortly after the Black Death, but a couple hundred years after the Black Death, or a few hundred, I should say. And so we can see it starting to skyrocket, and today it's continued to skyrocket. This is primarily because of farming. With more food, you can have more people, and with more people, they're going to have more people, and so you can keep that population growing. Now, one of the problems with this is you're going to run out of farm space for people, or farms to people to work on, because you're going to take up all the land with farms, and so you're going to have people looking for new places to go, and that's going to be to cities. One of the other problems for farmers and why they can't get land is because wealthy farmers or successful farmers or rich people are starting to buy up all the land. They're buying up the small farms because the small farms can't compete with the prices that the mechanized farming community is able to do, and so they get pushed out. And you get the Enclosure Acts doing this, which closed down all public lands, which also hurt the small farmers because they could go and forage there or bring their animals there to graze, but they can't do that anymore once those get closed down. And so farmers are going to leave after they get their land bought up. They'll sell their land if they can't scrape together a living, and take that money and go move to cities where they hope they can find a job. This is going to lead to less farmers growing or focusing on growing more of the land or whatnot, farming more of the land. It's similar to what you see happening today in Iowa and just across the states, in that you have Iowa being a lot of farmlands, but it's controlled by fewer and fewer people because less people are wanting to farm, and farming is becoming more and more expensive, so people need more land, more things to farm to be able to make ends meet. Urbanization is that shift that we saw into cities, and so all those farmers that are losing their jobs are moving to cities to hopefully eke a living out, and they're looking for jobs. And the one thing that comes up out of this with more and more people from leaving the countryside to cities, you start to congregate people into warehouses and then have them do some type of creation of something. And that's when then machines are going to come in and allow for more of that. So you're going to have cities to support those people that just lost their jobs on the family, and they're going to try to, or lost their farms, and so they're going to look for a job. And then these cities are going to grow. They're mostly going to grow around coal mining and iron areas, or they're going to grow up around other industries, especially ports in hauling goods in, or other factories or industries that have been set up in that area. And the people are going to live in kind of bad conditions in tenements, which are like apartment buildings, but not well produced or built apartment buildings. Now, some of the new technology, one we talked about kind of would have alluded to already if I would have gone into it, but that is the steam engine comes about with this, which makes the railroads possible. It also makes steamboats possible, and really the big thing is it makes power possible, and so you can actually make these factories go on a power source other than water wheels. So these factories back here, I should go back for a second, are mainly built around waterways because the water can turn a wheel, and that gets power for the factory to be able to run machines. What they then realize is, hey, if we take this machine that was originally used, the steam engine, to pump out water, we can then use that to turn pistons and other things like that, other gears, to then do the machines. And so they use that in factories instead, and now you can build your factory anywhere you want. This is super important. This is really what changes the game and how much can be produced and where it can happen. And this is really where if there is one major invention of the first industrial revolution, it is this. Now, some of those machines that are using the steam engine or we're using the power wheels or water-powered wheels are the spinning jenny, which spins many threads together and makes yarn and other things like that, and the power loom, which allows you to then weave things so you can make textiles and all that stuff much easier and cheaper and more consistent than someone doing it by hand and faster. So Those are new industries in the textile industry or the clothing and cloth industry. Um, Anything else I want to say there? I think that's kind of everything there. So there's a lot more technology that'll come out. New inventions will keep coming out that build off of these, and we'll see them spread to many more sectors than just these. Social class wise, you're going to see a major stratification of society now. You're going to have the upper class start to get really wealthy. The landowners are going to get wealthy from owning all that land. And the wealthy business owners that create super successful businesses are going to get up into those upper classes, and they're going to start to get into government. And then the middle class, who are your smaller business owners, they're your professionals in there, so your lawyers, your managers, stuff like that, are going to be doing the non-manual jobs and making lots of money there. You can think of those like today we call those white collar jobs, accountants, all those kinds of people are that, and they're going to need some type of education to do this. So we're going to see education rates rising, although it's not going to be for everyone. Not all the kids are going to school. Instead, a lot of them are going to be working if you're in a lower class family, but you're going to have some of that stuff going on. And then in our lower classes, we've got the lower class, which is your manual workers. So these are your blue collar jobs, the people that actually get kind of dirty doing things. So they're going to be your coal miners, your factory workers, your smelters, all that kind of stuff. You will also get child laborers working in this stuff because, well, these families don't make a ton of money, and so they need to have their kids go and work to keep the family afloat. They're also there's nothing else for the kids to do. There is no school for kids to go to, and there's no one to necessarily watch the kids at home because both mom and dad might be working, and so they send them to work, and that kind of works as a babysitter for them too. These lower class people are going to be working a very, very long day. Think about our normal work day today is about 8 hours or so. That's supposed to be the average 5 days a week, so 40 hours a week. Most likely, people would be working 6 days a week back then, and they would be working 10 to 12 to maybe 14-hour days. Some kids worked up to 12, maybe all the way up to 14, but mostly around 12 or 10. Adults would work usually a 12-hour shift or more. So really, really long hours, not great. These are not going to be the greatest working conditions or anything like that. They're going to live in the unsanitary portions of town in those tenements that we talked about because they don't have the money for it, for anything better. And so it's going to lead to some adverse health effects on them. And then for the women in these families, they're also going to be working. Now, if they're an upper class woman or a middle class woman, they're going to be expected to maybe work a little bit. If they're middle class, they're going to be working as a secretary or a teacher. And then once they get married, they're supposed to stop. And then if they're a lower class person, they're going to be working most likely in a textile industry, but could be working anywhere else. Not very likely in a coal mine or anything like that, but in another factory job. They might be there. And also women have few to no rights, but they're still expected to kind of run the households and do all that kind of stuff. So last couple slides here we got. The economy in this is where we really start to see a push for what we now today call capitalism. It was first kind of developed by a guy named Adam Smith before the Industrial Revolution happened, but we see it go into practice here during this. He termed the phrase laissez-faire, let it be, and that the idea was to keep the government out of the business of the economy and let the economy grow and do what it wants. There's a concept called the invisible hand, which is really just kind of supply and demand or market demand or what people want will determine what people buy. And that'll determine what businesses will thrive and which ones will fall apart. So he pushes that. And while that gets pushed, some people will say this is wrong, this is terrible. The people are not being treated well. They should be treated better. They should not be being abused like this. And so you'll get the ideas of socialism and communism coming out of this from the likes of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. And they're going to say companies have too much power. They abuse people too much, and therefore we need to overthrow them. And so the poor people, the workers, need to overthrow these businesses, take control over them, take control of the government, and make everyone equal, and make sure everyone gets enough money and everything else to survive, and that everyone's taken care of. So this is where you get your communist ideas, and this is ideal communism, not necessarily what gets, or ideal socialism, not necessarily what gets put into place, especially in places that we call communist, like China or the Soviet Union. Then all this money and this need for resources to fuel this or to find new markets to sell this stuff to is going to lead to more and more imperialism. So initially we saw the conquest of the Americas. And then we'll see revolutions. We saw revolutions come out of those. So then when those revolutions happen and they lose their markets in North America and South America and the resources from there, they're going to then look at Africa, South Asia, or Southeast Asia to get more resources to then bring back for cheap. And so they're going to go and conquer these places. Um, they also want to conquer these places, though, for those markets because they want to set up mercantilist type systems, which is not capitalism. Instead, that's where you have a parent country really focusing on just building up their trade and not worrying about the trade of others. And they don't want them to freely, the colonies to freely trade with anyone else. Um, and they want to do this because they want to get the raw materials for super cheap and then be able to compete with other producers of that stuff and make it cheaper than them and then sell it to them and take their money instead of having to buy their stuff. So um, that's going to lead to kind of all this stuff. Britain is going to become the top dog in imperialism, but all of Europe will pretty much jump in on the imperialism train. Even the U.S. will jump in on that stuff, even though it's independent. And so you can see here on this map if this plays. I don't know if it's going to play up. It's slowly playing here. So you can see the expansion of these European empires. And one thing that's going to really aid with the expansion of this is the industrialization that happened, in that they're going to be able to create new weapons and make lots of those weapons really quickly. So guns were around and in Africa, but you have at the start of this time, or actually later in this time, in the mid to late 1800s, you start to have the Maxim machine gun get developed. So you have a machine gun versus people with single fire rifles, and that doesn't work out too well for the people with single fire rifles. So you can see why they get conquered fairly easily and fairly quickly. By the start of World War I, pretty much all the world was controlled by Europeans, and then we can see it start to go back in the modern days after World War II. And that's kind of it. That's everything there on the Industrial Revolution and what it's all about.